Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Evolve Move Play podcast. Today I'm here with Stephane Vigroux. So, for those of you who don't know, Stephane was one of the very early adopters of parkour, the second generation of parkour athletes. He trained directly with David Belle, who was one of the founders of parkour, as well as members of the Yamakasi, who are some of the other founders of the discipline of parkour and l'art du déplacement. He went on to really become one of the leading teachers in the UK and spreading parkour around the globe with Parkour Generations, which he co-founded with Dan Edwards and Francois Mahop, or Forrest. Now you're teaching in Dubai and have started Parkour Dubai, or what's the name of the company you have there?
It's Parkour DXB. DXB stands for Dubai, yes.
Yeah, so Parkour DXB, and also teaching seminars, kind of trying to reconnect people with the origins of parkour all over the world with parkour origins. So I'm a huge admirer of Stephane's. His grace and style were really inspirational to me in the beginning, and I've always admired his way of flowing. And particularly, I think it's quite interesting. I believe that one of my favorite vaults, which is the thief vault, as people call it in English, I believe that you came up with that, right? You came up with that because there was a salle du chat that you couldn't do.
Yeah, right. The situation made me come with it. I just adapted to the task and the situation, really. But yeah, I guess that was me. You can blame me for that. Yeah.
So I think for the younger parkour community, you may not be as familiar with Stephane, but there's a huge amount of influence that he's had all over the world, and so it's really exciting to have you on. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rafe.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
So I want to talk about a few different things. I'm really excited to talk to you. I just got done reading some of your posts about the origins of your training with David and Williams. Just kind of reminding myself of the stuff that I want to talk to you about. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the history. I know that that's kind of probably the thing that people ask the most about. But I want to talk about the history just a little bit as a way to kind of really get into the philosophy and the things that have been forgotten about parkour. And then maybe at the end, I'd like to ask you some questions more specifically about practical advice, how to train and achieve some of the things that you've achieved. So let's start with, for those of the audience who really don't know you, how did you get started with parkour?
Well, so I started parkour in 1998 in Nice, in the suburb of Paris, in France. And basically, I was lucky enough to live near where David and the guys was living. Mm-hmm. So I was training breakdance with a friend of mine and a bit of Viet Vo Dao, which is a form of Vietnamese Kung Fu. Mm-hmm. And then anyway, he brought this videotape, homemade videotape of David and the Yamakasi. And he showed it to me, and then we just played it at my home, and that was the beginning of it. So it was a very strong visual things for me to be hit by. So it was visually very powerful in that sense, to see those shapes of human body traveling across spaces and terrain that was just unseen before, and so that was really powerful in that sense. And so straight away after that, we stopped the videotape. I went outside, get on the fence, and threw a backflip the first time in my life, just right after that. And then on my feet.
Wow.
And I was like, how do we meet those guys? I said, look, I actually organized a meeting with David Belle in the gym staircase in Nice, and that's going to be an opportunity for us to train and meet the guy. So I was thrilled, and then we went there, and then we started the first training. That's how I started.
Excellent. So how old were you when you started?
I was 18 years old.
18 years old. And were you in college or high school?
High school, yes. And I wasn't happy with what I was doing, really. I was, in French, we're very much into cuisine. Yeah. And cooking. So I was in a cooking school over there. I had no clue what I was doing there, really. I had no faith in that past, but I was doing that. And when I actually discovered parkour, I stopped. I quit school the week after, basically. Yeah.
And so you ended up training like 8 hours a day?
Oh yeah. So I quit school, and then I was just completely immersed into parkour, training parkour, eating parkour, sleeping parkour. dreaming parkour. It was more than 8 hours a day. It was really, I'm the kind of guy who does, who doesn't. You know, I do, I do not. And I did very intensive. It was 24/7 really. If I wasn't training or thinking or dreaming parkour, I was just resting in between. But it was quite intense. Yeah.
And for how many years were you training like that?
Right. Yeah. This phase didn't last, forever. I guess I had this kind of intensity for a good 4 to 5 years.
That's a long time to
This is
train
where
like that.
I really built myself. I really construct and build myself within that 4 to 5. This is where I swallowed, absorbed everything without thinking. And then I started to look back, and then you start to realize what you achieved, and you enter into a different phase where you start to realize, you think, you reflect. But for the first 4 or 5 years, it was just swallowing, doing at a very high intensity.
So I think that's one of the things that people really don't understand about the beginning era of parkour. Like reading Julie Angel's book, Breaking the Jump, that was one of the things that struck me, was the incredible volume and intensity with which you were trained. Like most people who do parkour now, they see some YouTube videos of people doing some cool jumps, and they try to do some jumps, and they're not necessarily adopting it as a lifestyle, not replacing their schooling, not replacing their work with this sort of insane training that you guys engaged in. So I think that's it's really kind of a forgotten aspect of the discipline. So you can talk a little bit about what it was that you guys did with all that time, and maybe why you felt it was necessary to train in that way.
So what we did with that time, I guess, was researching, exploring, looking for answers. And I think that's the why. The why was, for me and for most of the guys, actually, it was, I think Julie Angel pointed it out with a nice sentence. It was a quest for identity.
Yeah.
And I think we were all looking for answers somehow, some ways. And we had a lot of energy, and we channeled it through parkour, which basically parkour is a very wide discipline. It's not just jumping. It involves a lot of different movement, types of movement. So, it was a quest for a research about ourselves, about life, and then parkour, which was before, wasn't parkour. It was in the process of being created. So it was a creation process. And that's why I say you immerse yourself into something, and then you look back and you realize, oh, okay, this is parkour. But in this process of the creation, you're completely immersed into something, and then you just do things just by intuition, really.
Yeah.
And the motivation was to find myself. If I have to sum it up in one sentence, it was really about finding myself.
So interesting. People have talked for years about the parkour philosophy, and but it seems to me that for the most part, people don't have it's not very easy for people to describe it. And so I've had this kind of perception that there is a philosophy of parkour that's sort of emergent from practicing it, but that it hasn't maybe been perfectly articulated. And in particular, I think it's hard because the guys who founded it, for the most part, you're one of the best English speakers among that kind of early group of people. And so because English is the language where it's spreading through most of the rest of the world, I think there's a disconnect that happens there. So I really, just to kind of go back, I saw parkour, I fell in love with it. It called on something to me. And for years I was really trying to figure out what it was. And I remember these debates that would go on Facebook. And finally, I think it was pawa.ru had a definition that came out from David. And it said basically parkour it's kind of the Wikipedia definition. It's getting from one place to another as fast as possible. It's evade and escape, right? Or evade and reach. That was the idea that we got. So I was pretty surprised by that, right? We were doing a bunch of flips off things because I came from a gymnastics background. And then it was like, well, if we really want to be serious about this, then we're not flipping off stuff. We're like really trying to figure out how to go from one place to another. And so for years I was trying to like refine the definition of what we were doing so that I could teach my students appropriately. And so I ended up with this definition that parkour was the practice of developing the ability to overcome obstacles effectively. And then kind of I realized later that wasn't complete, and it was like it's the practice of developing the ability to overcome obstacles effectively and developing yourself through overcoming obstacles. And then when I read that book and when I through my talks with you and various other guys, I realized that I had the whole thing backwards, that it was the practice of developing yourself through overcoming obstacles and everything else sort of came came after that, right? So I guess what I wanted to say is, to you said it was about, discovering who you were. Was that what it was internally, or was that what the story that you were learning as you engage with this one? Didn't you have a story about what you were doing when you began?
What do you mean?
So what was the definition of parkour when you first discovered it? Obviously it was...
No, it was again, it was the very, very early stage of parkour. So it was still in the process of being in the creation of parkour. So there wasn't anything established. It was just a spark.
Yeah.
A spark. And personally, it's just a journey, I've always, before parkour, my interest and passion in life always have been about discovering myself, my potential, how can I learn, grow and improve. And then eventually share with others, serve in some ways. It always had been there from a very, very young age. And I wasn't happy in the system that was offered to me, school, the very academic system, or the options like go to school, get a job, be happy. It wasn't resonating in me. And I was very frustrated with that. And parkour just came on my way. Yeah. I engaged with that, still with the idea of it wasn't that clear, I speak now after 20 years of practice. But I guess I've been called by parkour because I was in that kind of research about myself and life in general. And I went there, and I went that way. I quit everything, all the standard academic, path, just dropped that one, went to parkour. I had no clue what it was, no clue where it would lead or what I would achieve through parkour. I just knew it felt right for me to do, and it would give me answers. It would challenge me in ways where I would grow, I would learn, and I would find the answers.
Awesome. So it seems to me almost like the feeling I have when you describe it is you guys had stumbled upon something, right? You had stumbled upon something that was deeply meaningful, and you were just you had to figure out what it was. You had to go deep into it.
Yes, exactly. Deep into ourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But exactly. We just discovered the gem, an amazing tool for us to, like the diamond, like a bit raw, and then you shape around it. It was just a tool for us to discover all that.
It's interesting because, I was a gymnastics teacher, and I had been practicing gymnastics since I was 15. I was 23 when I discovered parkour, and the feeling that I had when I saw a parkour video for the first time was as if someone had taken gymnastics and just ripped the top off of it, so that I saw the layer underneath, the thing that was actually below it, the thing that in my perspective, that we evolved to do. And so it's interesting that it seems like there's commonality there in this feeling of like, whoa, there's something here.
I can relate to that. There's an element of truth to that. That's what I said when I first watched the videotape, the homemade old school videotape. I was like, there's a strong element of truth in that. It's powerful. The way this body moves is like, it's like the ultimate version of a human being kind of thing.
Okay. Well, it looks good now. Just was looking at the audio. It looked like we're getting audio. We're recording? Okay, cool. So, sorry guys, we had a little bit of a technical hiccup there. Lost audio for a second. So, missed a question that I asked, which is essentially, one of the things that's interesting about the parkour practice for me is that it seems like I think one of the things that people go into it looking for is a sense of truth, a sense of challenging themselves with something that's as real as it gets. So, I've done a lot of martial arts training, and most martial arts coaches will tell you don't fight, and that's good because otherwise you're going to pick fights with people, and people end up getting hurt. You can't really test yourself in martial arts without doing a sport competition. So most people who train martial arts, they never do the thing that they're training for. And I think this is true in a lot of senses of most of the kind of movement disciplines that are out there. But the cool thing about parkour is you can go find a jump where you can do it, and you can do it within your tolerance, but it's real. And if you fail, the consequences are real. And so it's the most real way of looking directly at what you're like when you face a real challenge. Does that
Yes,
resonate for you?
yeah, it's very real in that sense. It's a very direct experience you have, whether you succeed or you fail. It's a very direct experience in that sense. And yeah, it's a way to reconnect, to link the dots between an idea you have and the reality of your action. So you have a thought, you have an idea, you have a feeling. I can do that. I have it in me. It's all wonderful in your head, and then you face it, and you actually link the two dots between what's happening in your mind and your thought and the actual reality of the action. And it's very real in that sense. And there's definitely an element of truth in there. You can't lie with parkour.
Yeah, I like that about that. Are you familiar with Nassim Taleb? He wrote the book Anti-Fragile and the Black Swan.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's this idea of skin in the game. You can't trust an expert on anything unless they have skin in the game. Parkour is like a place to really put your skin in the game on having expertise in the way that you move your body.
I agree.
So one of the things I really wanted, with my work, right, I teach elements of parkour, I teach elements of martial arts, I teach elements of strength and conditioning, I teach elements of dance and capoeira, and I of course I do it primarily in nature. And a lot of people map that to general movement culture or compare it to MoveNet, but I actually think in a lot of ways it's just it's a derivation of parkour primarily, and it's actually, it seems to me that a lot of what I do was actually contained within the original method of parkour, and that somehow that's gotten lost over time. So it's interesting if you kind of talk about some of the things that you guys were doing that you don't see in YouTube videos anymore.
Yeah, I agree. So today we have a very strong communication around movement culture, that embodies all those different practices. Dance, capoeira, parkour is one of them now. And it's just, I guess, communication. Today we know that movement culture, that's what it means. It's where, you're a generalist and you train all those different disciplines. Fine. The thing is, from my point of view, who started parkour 20 years ago, it was exactly like that. Maybe we haven't communicated well around this idea, but it was definitely a very broad discipline, as you said. And I found myself training fighting, throwing knives. We had a period where we were throwing knives every day. We had them in our backpacks. It was about throwing knives to trees most of the times. Wrestling, lifting dead trees, lifting rocks. Of course, a lot of jumping, a lot of climbing. I think it was again a principle of putting yourself in a challenging position, and how can you adapt to a situation with your body and your imagination, and then somehow embrace the struggle. You have this very uncomfortable situation. It's challenging for you, and how do you adapt and overcome that? And how much do you learn from that situation? And those situation was involving a lot of movement. Of course, it was very, very broad. Again, back then, parkour wasn't parkour. So it was a research of exploring the possibilities with your body and your mind, and how do you react, how do you adapt to a challenge and a struggle. That was it, and that led to many different types of movement.
So do you think it's a useful thing then that parkour has kind of become this very specific and narrow thing, or do you think the mentality of parkour would be better served by a practice that contained more of these broad elements?
Yes, I think in principle you want to keep that mindset of being broad and being open to any forms of challenges that resonate for you. And if you feel like it's like the call for a jump when you break a jump, if you have a call for something that you think will benefit you, go for it. And I think that's the mindset you want to keep. Now, about being specific with parkour, I don't mind it too much, in the sense that parkour is quite, even if you go very parkour specific, it's quite a broad discipline anyway, in terms of types of movement. All the running, climbing, jumping, vaulting, all those different types. It's already quite a good discipline. Mm-hmm. But the mindset, I think you should keep an open mind and embrace the thing that you think will challenge you on a deep level, and then you'll be in a facing a struggle, and then how do you adapt to that? How do you react to that? I think this is where the real value of the challenge is. And then, because at some point, like myself, it's difficult for me to find this amount of challenge through parkour because I've done it for so many years. I know myself, I know an obstacle, and the decision happened quite quickly. I know I cannot, I know I can do or I cannot do that. So it's pretty clear, pretty easy game for me to play. So I'd be more challenged if I go to a yoga class, for example. I have no clue what's going to happen, and I'm going to challenge myself in a more honest way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of a topic that I think about a fair amount, which is, so we have this idea of being a generalist mover, right? And one of the problems with being a generalist is, of course, that you don't get to be that great at anything. And you have to go and continue sucking at lots of things. Every time you want to try something new, you have to go back to being a novice. But I also think there's a flip side to that, which is that if you don't go deeply into any one practice, you never have to hoe the hard rows, if that makes sense. You never have to suffer as deeply and
Yes,
to learn the deep lessons.
I agree with that. It's like the story I heard recently about the monk saying that you'd rather learn to do one punch 10,000 times than doing 10,000 different punches one time.
Yeah.
I think it's really great. So that's why even today I'm immersed into parkour again. I just do the things I used to do better. Mm-hmm. Just being more in line with me, produce a better result, a more refined result. The way I move, the way I feel. Always used to challenge myself doing handstands, for example. I'm into a 30 days handstand challenge. I put myself in a different situation. I've never done that before. So I'm still doing the handstand, but to a higher level. I was on my rooftop last week doing a handstand in the corner of the building. Real truth in there. If you fall, you die. But so I had to just push a little bit further. So I'm into that zone now. I'm being more specific about parkour. So there's still, I just basically realized there's still room to improve in those fields where I've been an expert, for many years. There's still room to improve even there, both physically and most importantly, mentally.
So how would you strike the optimal balance between making sure that you're regularly making yourself broad enough? Because it's, I guess the problem of the specialist is that it gets scary to go do something new because you have to suck again. Mm-hmm. And then the problem of the generalist is it's scary to make yourself go past the plateaus in the hard things, right? It's like it's easy to kind of be like, well, I got to the point where this is hard. Now I'm going to go do something else. Or I got to this point where I feel like I've got everything that's out of it, instead of saying maybe I can go deeper, maybe I can go deeper. So how do you strike that balance between broadening and kind of continuing to research in depth?
It's a very good question. And there's ways to hide into both of those approaches, where you can hide it in your comfort zone in both. You could be a very good specialist but not improving, or you could be a generalist and say, I can't be good at everything. So it's an easy way to hide and say, I can't be good at everything. So that's your excuse kind of thing. So it's a very good question. I think I'm personally more of a guy who behave through intuition and feelings and try to really find what's right for me at the right time. I know you strike me as a man who's quite structured in the head, and you like to go deep and put orders into things. So maybe you'll come up with some sort of a method, or how do you know when is the best time for you to act as a generalist or as a specialist? Personally, as I said, is very much down to my intuition, where I am in my life and what benefits me the most. And right now I feel like going back to that zone of a specialist, doing the things I've been doing for 20 years, but even better with more benefits, is very interesting. So it makes sense for me now. And I don't know how long I'm going to stay in that zone. I might just try yoga next and then suck at it. But I guess it has to make sense. It's about, parkour is also about, listening to your inner self really deeply, and then try to find out what feels right. It's part of training.
Yes, that's something that's particularly...
It's a good question. I don't have the answer.
Yeah,
straight
that's
answer
good.
to that.
But but we were saying about this idea of self-knowledge, right? That's a theme that's come up a few times in here, and I wanted to dig more deeply into kind of the philosophy of parkour, because it's particularly interesting to me right now, because I'm really researching philosophy a lot and trying to answer the question of why. I recently wrote an article about kind of, I view parkour basically, or movement practice, what I do as essentially it's trying to kind of physically embody the Dragon Slayer archetype, right? Because it's about going on a quest and confronting something that's outside the scope of what you do, that's scary to you, and then you gain something from that. And in one of your articles, you're talking about Williams Belle, who was one of your mentors, and about his realization that the jump isn't about the jump, right? That the jump answers something within him, and it's the only reason that it's important. And I'm thinking about this a lot right now. I'm 35, and I've got 2 small children. I'm going to have a new daughter in a month. And,
wow, awesome! Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's like, if I jump, I did a jump recently that was 25 feet up in a tree, and it's a 9-foot gap, and it's a straight drop, right? There's no branches to catch me if I fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, how long am I in the air? Maybe less than a second, right? Maybe a second. And so why take the risk of your life for 1 second, or 1 second of movement, right? The only reason that I can come up with is because it changes something in me that's worthwhile to become the person that I become through doing that jump. And so fundamentally, it's like the thing that we're after is the meaning that we gain, or the people we become through this process. So where's the question in that? Sorry. So it seems to me that that's actually kind of at the heart of what the philosophy of parkour was about, is that it's about this process of confronting yourself and finding out who you are in a more deep level. And I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about your experience of that, of going from when you were exposed to training with William, and he brought that question of the meaning of your practice to you. How did that change how you practice, and how did you change the way that you perceive the discipline?
There's a lot of information in what you just said. The why. William asked me this question at the very early stage of my practice, and he kept asking me through my practice. Every now and then, every time I meet him, do you know why you do this? And I knew it was important to answer that question. I didn't have the answer, but I kept practicing. I think I just pointed out the answer to that a month or 2 months ago. So it took me 20 years basically to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Excellent.
So it's a constant reflection. And who knows, it might change. No, I don't think so. I think I have a clear understanding of who I am and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And it's funny you say that, because of the handstand challenge I'm doing, I just posted my last post on Instagram. It's just quick paragraph, but people ask me, why do you risk your life? Why do you go up there, do a handstand? It lasts for 10, 15 seconds. Why do you risk your life like that? People call me disrespectful, crazy. It's quite the opposite. I have so much value for life that I actually have to bring the best of me to the world, and I have to improve myself to the best I can, because I value life so much. And I must commit to the task of learning, improving, and growing. And then just bring the best of me to the world. That's really, really important to me. So as you said, even if your jump lasts a second, there's so much benefit you get out of it. It doesn't have to be this way for everybody. It's a personal choice. When you say that's the parkour philosophy, I can relate to that, but it's a very personal thing. I won't ask everybody to go take the same risk I'm taking. And also, my why or your why is yours, I think parkour, one of the beauty of parkour is that it has a lot of options available for people. For some people, it's just a sport. I just walk out and I do parkour. Yeah. For some people, it's an art form. It's a way to express myself, connect with my creativity. this is my self-expression through movement. Some people, it's more than that. There's a spiritual element to it about the why and who you are, what is your purpose, what's the meaning of your life, and then you get some answers through parkour practice. You have all those different available options on the table, but the why has to be personal. It's not because we speak about that and we can relate to it, that the why of everybody has to be, okay, I do parkour so I can improve myself, have a better life. Or I think it's a very available option. It doesn't have to be this option for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that it seems to me that there's the thing that's individual about everybody, right? Everybody has a way of connecting to whatever they do that's specific to them because of their own personality, their own history. But then there's the things that are common across everybody, right? And I'm really interested in those things that, like, you can say, this seems to be a thing that we're seeing over and over again. So, like, when I hear Williams talk about, or in the book, in your article, he talks about this idea of, like, I do it because it's meaningful, training for meaning. And then I read philosophy, and it's like, well, how do you live a more meaningful life? Or I listen to, one of my favorite quotes is a mountaineering quote. It's something like, it's not what the man does to the mountain, it's what the mountain does to the man. So it's like you see that theme repeatedly. And of course, there's variability, but it also seems like to me there's something that is general, right? That if we pay attention to it, the question I have is, it seems to me that if you choose to do it, it's meaningful to you. So then you ask the question, why is it meaningful to me?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an important question. If you don't answer that question, you move forward without a purpose, without a meaning, in the dark. So you keep moving forward, that's good. Maybe, and keep moving forward, because maybe one day you'll hit the answer. But it's so much more meaningful, and it makes sense. Once you know why you're doing things, everything is just boom, it's just like you switch on the light. Everything makes sense, and then every action then is done with more intention. There's more intent in your action, there's more clarity, and then as a result, there's better results for you and the people around you. Yeah. So the why is very important, and as I said, William asked me this question over and over again, and I knew it was important. And just now, just like two months ago, I just hit the button. Like, okay.
Yeah. So can you describe your why, like, one more time, or like as precisely as possible?
Yes, that's where I am. I try to put in a sentence, and I'm not sure about the sentence, but okay, let's say it as it is right now. But you'll get the idea. I'm not sure about the wording, but the idea is for me I'm here to learn, improve, and grow, so I can bring the best out of me to the world and to serve and help others in some ways.
Beautiful. Okay, awesome. That's a good why.
Yeah.
A mission statement.
Yeah.
So here's another question that kind of just pops in my head, but I think it's kind of it's meaningful to me. Have you ever found that your why, the thing you were aimed at in your practice, wasn't aligned with what you actually wanted, right? Like you set the goal, you decided on a why, but it wasn't the right why, and then you feel that tension in your practice. Have you ever been in that place?
Tension in my practice, yes. You go off track, and again, it's just, why do you go off track? To get slapped and learn another lesson. And as I said, if you don't know your why, then you move forward in the dark. And then you're still exploring and you're still researching, so you do mistakes on the way, and then you get out of track, you get out of alignment, and you get slapped in the face, and you come back. And it took me 20 years. Some people, it could take longer or shorter. It's a journey.
So, yeah, there's for just in my own practice, like there's this this tension between trying to define really clearly what I'm trying to do, and then also recognizing that maybe the thing that I can define will never encompass the thing that I'm trying to define, right? So that about 5 years ago, I got really into, I wanted to do parkour competitions, and I wanted to lift a certain amount of weight and do all these specific skills. And and I kept running into the problem that like I really just wanted to be in the trees instead of in the gym working on this specific skill. Or like the next competition was going to be a competition in the gym, but I hated training in the gym. I wanted to be outside. And so it was like the why that I had set out for myself was not the motivation that was actually inside me, and I just didn't know it yet. I didn't understand who I really was.
It wasn't aligned.
Yeah. So do you have any advice for young practitioners on trying to find that alignment between the why that they can think up and the why that's actually inside?
Yeah, well, the main one is the one that inside, the one that comes from your inner light in your soul, really deep down, and then that's a very personal journey, and it's a lonely process. You know, you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to look at yourself as a whole, your dark side, your good side. Try to understand who you are. You have a lot of techniques for that, but it's a lonely process. It's a honest process, and it can take time. But I wouldn't be bothered too much, in the sense that it's okay to do mistakes. It's okay to try things out. It's okay to be off track. It's a learning process. And it's a lonely process. Yeah, that's what I can say. I guess it's awareness as well. You know, try to really observe: are your actions in line with who you are? Does it feel right? Does it feel good? It's always an indication. You know, if it feels right, feels good, you usually feel it. You have a different energy when you feel good about things. So, a very simple thing. I think awareness about the things you're doing. Is it making me feel better? Is it making me feel good? And if it does, you're probably on the right track. It's just something, you know, as you said, you were training for competition, but deep down, I hate being in the gym. So you have all those answers. So I guess, you know, paying attention, pose yourself. Is it right? Does it feel right? Is it 100% clear? Yes or no? And then I think awareness, again, it's a process, it's a journey, and it's a lonely process. I think you have also to be, as I said, honest in that process.
Back to honesty, right?
Yeah.
Parkour is a place where if you don't tell the truth, you may rip your knee in half.
Yes, yeah. It will hit you back, one way or the other.
Actually, that was something I wanted to dig into, because people look at these jumps that we do and they think, man, that's so dangerous, that's so crazy. But it feels like to me that when you know that you can do the jump, it's not that dangerous. Like it's about cultivating it's about recognizing the right feeling. That when you're not in that place of alignment, when you're not in that place when you're really listening to your deepest self, that's when you get hurt.
Yes. And exactly. And when you're on the line, it is dangerous. So for me, what's dangerous is you having some dreams, and instead of listening to that, you're in an office from 8 to 6 p.m. doing the things you don't like to do. That's very dangerous. More than the jump I'm doing because I'm aligned.
Yeah.
And I'm going to beat it. Yeah.
And when we do the jumps for the wrong reason, you know, I was talking to Dylan Baker about that. Do you know Dylan Baker?
Yes, I know the man. Yeah.
Yeah. He was talking about like, so I have a couple really kind of big, scary jump goals, and he's been helping me with my mental game and prepping for these goals. And one thing he said was about is like, you really have to not do the jump for anybody else. You really have to not do the jump for the camera when your life is on the line. It's like, it really has to be for you. And if you go in and you're like, you're pressured about letting other people down, you're pressured about this, you're pressured about that, it's like, that's when you get, you know, Dylan came very close to dying, because he wanted to do a jump, a vault really, and he went up there to prepare for it, and then he was there with his friends, and he kind of didn't want to take too much of their time. He didn't want to let them down. And so instead of listening to himself, he was listening to all this stuff around him. And he his hand slipped out on a Kong like 300 feet off the ground. Caught himself by the tips of his fingers.
Wow.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was kind of your experience when you tore your knee up as well, wasn't it?
Yes, very much so. Again, a setup that I wasn't used to on a filming set with a lot of people, cameras around, you have this pressure. You know, when you train on your own, you do things at your own rhythm. You want to do the jump, fine. You don't want to do the jump, fine. You do things when you want to. And you manage your time and your expectations and the pressure at your own pace and rhythm. On set, I was young and I felt the pressure. I felt like I have to deliver and I had to perform. And even though I had, my body gave me signals already. You have to stop. You're in pain now. You did the jump a few times. You are happy with that. But I didn't listen. So you didn't listen. And then you get slapped instantly. Lesson learned. I hope Dylan learned his lesson as well, which I hope he did. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. So it's
and if you don't listen, life throw ping pong balls first, and then life throw the bowling balls right next after if you don't listen. So
yeah. Yeah, it's true. Okay, so once again we had a little technical difficulty, and now it's a week later, and we've got Stephane back. So the last question that we had talked about was the danger that you face when you're not aligned internally with the jump that you're trying to do, when you're letting external pressures kind of guide you into doing something that you're not actually ready for. And this really brings up one of the most important topics in parkour, which is the topic of the mental game. So parkour is a physical act in many ways, but what allows it is this mental act. And when Stephane came here 2 years ago and taught a seminar, he had a really beautiful description of and a process for training the ability to break a jump. So I wanted to ask you, Stephane, to explain for the audience how you go about breaking a jump, and then we can actually go in depth into some of the pieces of how we can do that better.
Yeah. Touching quickly before I go more in depth with the different steps of breaking a jump. Before there's the act, I see even before that there's personally speaking anyway, it doesn't apply to everybody. There's a spiritual element to it, there's a mental element to it, and then there's an action, physical element to it. But for me, that part just comes last. And it should be, and this is how you understand if you're in line with yourself, where you are. It comes before the act, so that's important to understand the order of things, for me anyway. Because breaking the jump is already quite advanced in the process. It's in the action bit, which is the last part. If you haven't answered your motivation mentally, spiritually, then you might be out of line, and then the breaking the jump process won't be that useful at that stage. So yeah, while delivering the Parkour Origins course with you guys, I tried to encourage you guys to reflect on what was happening when you break a jump, and identify those 6 different steps that are very, important and part of the process. So then you can know where you are and what's the missing step, and then you can work on it and also understand what's missing, and also give you tools so how to go to the next step. So there was basically 6 steps, and the first step is what I call the call for the jump. It's something that you connect with in the first place. You have this call for doing an action, and that resonates within you, and that's, for me, that's the trigger of the rest of it. So you have the call of the jump, and then what happens once you have this call from afar, then you get closer to that jump. And then you get familiar with that jump. You start to assess distances, takeoff, landings, material, surfaces, and you get really familiar. You have a better feel of the actual task. Then what comes next, when you have a real feeling of it, then usually fears comes in, because it gets real, and it gets real. So you have fear that comes in and disrupt the mind. Then you have to, the 4th step, once the fear is here with you, you find a way to overcome the fear. So it goes through what I call visualization process. You have different ways to do it, whether you measure the jump, whether you count the steps, or you do smaller jumps on the side to get the feel of it and get confidence. You build confidence. I do personally a lot of visualization where I really see the jump. I see myself doing it. I feel how it is. I see very detailed way of landing, absorbing the landing, takeoff. So I do a lot of visualization, very detailed visualization. That's the 4 steps after. Once the fear is there, you have some sort of a process where you find a way to face the fear and unlock it, overcome it. Then the 5th step after that is decision making. You make a strong decision. You don't make the decision while you are in the air. It's too late. You make the decision way before. For running jumps, I always tell people, as soon as you do the first step, you're already engaged. You're committed. There's no way back. If you change the mind on the second step, you're screwed. You want to make a strong, stable decision. Just on the first step, you're already there. And after your decision making, there's the action. That's the final step I see to the process. And if you add a 7th step, then that could be the reward and the benefits from the process.
So I think that's interesting because when I talk about that, the example I like to give is the backflip, right? It's the classic example of people deciding in the middle of a skill that they made the wrong decision, and it never goes well, right? You go halfway through a backflip and you change your mind, you always land on your head.
Exactly, it happened to me as well.
Yeah, so it's a great breakdown of how you accomplish the jump. And it's interesting to me, and I mentioned this in our last conversation, but it tailors in perfectly to a concept that comes out of the military, which is the UDA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. And that's something that we see across kind of any physical task and really in life, right? In life, you're constantly facing new circumstances. You're having to, observe, okay, something's changed, orient to it. This is how it's changed, and make a decision. And then you have to act on it. Whether that's like, observe, there's a punch coming at my face. Orient, someone's trying to punch me. Decide, I'm going to duck, and then act, duck, right? So that takes time, and the ability that we have to refine that process and to really get strong at it, I think is one of the most profound aspects of parkour. I think that you don't just get messed up during a big running jump because you didn't assess it properly, or you didn't process your fear properly, or because you backed out of your decision. That happens if you're starting a business. That happens if you're in a relationship. That happens all the time. That same fundamental process is something that is so important across all of your life. So I was curious to have you kind of talk about how what you've experienced with cultivating that process in your movement practice, and then to what degree it has transferred, or do you have strategies to transfer it to life in general?
Yes, 100%. For me, it's again more and more. It always has been, but more and more now. Parkour is it's physical practice, obviously, with a lot of tools for me to be a better version of myself in my everyday life. Love relationship, work relationship, me and the company. Because as you say, we do face all those different situations, facing the exact same process. There's a call, there's an inspiration. You want to go in some direction. You don't know what it is. It's scary. It's challenging. How do you handle that? How do you do your decision making, and then act? So 100% for me, it's really about how does your practice help you in your life? How does this translate in your everyday life? We're here to live. We're not here to jump. Plain and simple. And a good life, hopefully, meaningful life. So it's really, really important for me to keep the focus always on, is my practice helping me to get a better life? Yes, good. No, what is helping me then? And I should aim for that. And that's why also sometimes I tell people, very, very stubborn people, we're super stubborn in parkour. I do parkour forever, all my life. Yeah, sure. Is it helping you? Does it make sense? There's part of your life where maybe it won't help you. Maybe playing golf will help you, in some ways, more than parkour. In which case, play golf. Don't do parkour. You'll come back to parkour later. But it's really about how does it apply to your life, and how is it serving your life to help you, having a better life, happier life. Yeah.
Cool. So, could you just go a little bit more in depth on either observations that you've had of how it has helped you, or or kind of strategies that we can use so that the strength that we develop in parkour actually translate? Because I think a lot of times it's assumed that, you know, if you can jump, then you can ask a girl out. If you can jump, then, you know, maybe you can be committed to the process of starting a business. And I think that there's a certain degree of transfer that's sort of automatic, but it's easy to get kind of trapped because you fall in love with the thing that you feel like is making you strong, and you're not actually paying attention to whether it's making you strong in the rest of your life. And you're not maybe taking the actions to make that connection. It's like you have to go in with an intention to actually use it in that way to gain those benefits, is what I've observed. So I'm just curious about your own experience with that.
Well, it's a lot of awareness and, you know, paying attention. You know, is it serving your life? Yes or no? And it's a constant question, you know, questioning in the background of your head, and being very honest in that sense. And it's constant observation. And once you have this observation, you're aware, then you can consciously practice those techniques, you know, and be aware, okay, this is happening now. Do I want to do this in life? Yes. Is it scary? Yes. And then, you know, gather all those information and then, you know, process all that and act. And then you become, so you go from consciously competent to unconsciously competent at some point, if you keep practicing that. I think through the habit of practicing that in parkour, in a physical, you know, context, then it builds a lot of confidence in many, many levels. I'm good at kind of trusting my intuition now. And I live my life by intuition. And then how does it feel? Does it feel right? And then I try to develop my intuition a lot through parkour. The call of a jump, it's talking to me, it resonated in me, and I engage with that. And there's an idea, there's a thought, and then there's the reality. And I think the process of also breaking a jump is how you match your idea. Oh, I can do this jump. I can do, like for the handstand challenge I was doing last month, I can do the handstand on top of that building. That's a thought. Now, does it match the reality? And then the more you connect between your thoughts, your vision, and the actual reality, and it builds it kind of confidence that you know you can do, and you do it. So there's this kind of strong connection between an idea and your reality. And that builds the confidence and an ability to trust your intuition. And then you become consciously competent in that, and you can then apply that to different areas of your life. Yeah.
You told me a funny story when you came to visit about applying your competence in breaking jumps when you visited Brazil with Dan and Blaine, I believe. You remember the story?
Yeah.
You want to share that with the audience?
Yeah, for sure. I was single back then, just to be clear. So yeah, I was exactly that. So I went through a difficult breakup back then, and I lost a lot of confidence. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. You get dumped, heartbroken, you lose confidence. So Blaine and Dan, always very, you know, helpful friends, decided to put me on a challenge. And the challenge was that I had to talk to random girls in the street, restaurants, shopping malls, wherever, you name it. And I was set on challenges where I had to ask names, names of relatives, where she lived, what she's doing, does she like her life, different questions like that to complete strangers. And I had to interact with most of them beautiful girls. They were very picky with the girls, obviously. And then I had to engage with those conversations. So obviously I was super, super scared. At the beginning, and then after a few days of practice, and then you break that fear, you get familiar with that feeling, and then you realize it's not that bad actually. And I learned a lot from that. Actually, most of the girls were very flattered at the end of the day because I was genuinely interested and kind, and people respond well to that. Yeah. So it taught me a lot, and it was a great experience. And that was a very practical, I guess, exercise on how you experience a similar process. In real life, talking to a girl.
Do you think that the courage that you developed in parkour helped you the first time you had to try that task?
Yes, again, I know I had the will somewhere. I know that in parkour, if I want something, I get it.
Yeah.
And again, the idea of, I want it, I get it. And you connect with that more and more, again and again and again. I want it, I get it. Simple as that. I want it, I get it. And so I had confidence in that. And then it's a matter of how do you transfer that ability into something else. But I knew I had this will in me, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that when if I go to train dance or some other movement art, I'm still a novice, my feet are still confused. I'm still awkward, but I have two things going for me that some other novice doesn't have. One, I have confidence that I've been through some sort of similar physical process and that I know that I can get there. And two, I feel like I have a process in my brain of how I gain skill, and I gain it faster. So it's not like I'm good at tricking the first time I try it because I've done parkour. It's more like I know how to start getting better.
Yeah. And you have a belief there. You believe in that very strongly. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing to have, the belief.
Awesome. So this is I wanted to tell that story, but I want to go back for a second to the idea of intuition, because I think this is a really interesting area for me, because I'm a hyper analytical person in a lot of ways. And I've been very interested in rationalism and debate and argument and trying to, science, and I've applied that really intensely into how I teach people, for instance. And I've learned over the years that it's incomplete, that it's useful. It's very useful to have that ability to understand all these highly analytical topics and be able to break things down into pieces. But it doesn't connect, or it doesn't work unless it's intuitive. And one of the things that you learn through studying the analytical aspects of science is that the cognitive mind, the mind that reasons, is actually a relatively small portion of your mind, and that most of what you experience is subcognitive, and that intuition is in many ways it's the subcognitive mind communicating with the cognitive mind. So I was talking to somebody else in a podcast recently about this idea that parkour actually, in movement practice, they actually help us understand the value and power of intuition more effectively, because they help us tune into signals they help us tune into our bodies. And I was curious to hear more about your experience of how you've built your power of intuition, how you've noticed that it's powerful through your movement practice.
Yeah, just quickly to get back on something you just said. I think parkour helps you develop your intuition. Why? Because you expose yourself to the unknown, and you analyze after. The analysis comes after, once the action is done, and you can gather all those data. Before that, it's just you facing the unknown, and this is where you have to dig deep down. So intuition, I don't know. We obviously all wired differently, and as you said, you have a tendency naturally to analyze things, and I can see that very clearly, the way you talk, the way you write, the way you teach, the way you present. And as you said, it's necessary. There's no good or right here. It's just who you are naturally, wired. And I'm always have been since a very, very young age, a more like intuitive person, connecting with my heart, my light, feeling things. Even now, how I run my company, I'm so grateful I have a partner who's very rational, very practical, and who does the things necessary for the company. My brain is like, I feel we should do this now with the other classes. There's something missing. We have to improve the content and then bring something more. It's always about my vision in the company. That's what I do. It's just I bring ideas and visions on where to go, and we should go there. It sounds right. It's always been very natural, and I guess parkour just really developed and reinforced that in me. And I guess that's why I love parkour in some ways. But facing the unknown, having the call for the jump, I think is a very, very important step. The first step, the call for the jump, because it's very personal. It touches on something that you have deep down. What is the call for a jump? Why do we have a call for a jump? And now why would I have a different call for a different jump? And why the call for the jump in the first place? Why the need to go there and be curious about that challenge? This is you. This is your soul, your light. Why there's something in you that ask you to go there and get curious. What kind of answers are you looking for? I think the first step is very, very interesting. This is where you connect with your depths, and then there's a relation with your intuition over there.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting observation. It's something I've been thinking about from some of the philosophical thinkers that I've been paying attention to, is this idea of, where do your desires arise from? Where does your attention arise from? So you see something and you decide you see something. Why did you see it?
Yeah.
Right?
Are you curious?
Because you didn't decide to see it. It presented itself to you. It said, "Here I am," and that maybe says something about the. You could think of it as saying something about the you that's trying to become something.
Aha. Here we go.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
I agree.
The Phoenix principle. It's the thing that's trying to be reborn is showing you a path.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's cool because like we talked about earlier with this idea of like, you need to stress test yourself. You need to have skin in the game in order to really learn something. It's like you go through that intuitive process in parkour, and it works, or you get burned, and then you've actually fed that intuitive system some information. So it tells you the truth the next time.
Yeah,
it gets you
and
closer
you
to
can
telling the truth.
rely on that ability more and more. That's why I said, and more my life, I use that intuition skill ability in many areas. Relationship. Do I want to walk with that person? No, something wrong about it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything on paper looks good, something wrong about it, and I don't go there.
Yeah.
And the good thing again with my partner, he respects that, because he also learned that I have an ability there, and he respects that, and then that helps so the company.
That's awesome. Cool. So let's back up for a second to the elements of the call, the elements of breaking the jump, because I think this is something that can really be broken down into a lot of pieces. And I asked you last time, the conversation that didn't get recorded. One of the problems for somebody who's entering this world is actually finding any jumps that call to them at all. So now we have another chance to kind of like break that down. How would you take someone who has no sort of intuitive sense of play really anymore, who's never moved it, and they see this stuff on YouTube, but they don't, but it's way outside of their league. So now they're having to see the things that are available to them. What are some tips you would give people to start that process, to start finding the jumps that are an appropriate call for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. It seems hard for beginners because they don't have the vision, and they don't see the possibilities. As a matter of fact, I believe for beginners, there's way more possibilities for them to grow, because everything is a challenge pretty much when you begin. So I would recommend to don't have too high ambitions and stay, as you said, there's a lot of things outside of your league. And it's a matter of really recollecting and keep it very, very, very simple. And to listen to you. And don't put a focus on what you see on YouTube or what your friend is doing in the class. He's better, he's been there for a year, whatever. Listen to yourself, what is challenging you? And if you keep it simple, very, very simple, one step at a time, can I do this? Can I do this? With that kind of reflection, can I do this? And even if it sounds ridiculous, can I go over that bench in front of me? And go over it. Okay, good. That's a starting point. That was kind of easy. Can I do it now using only one hand? Can you do it now closing my eyes? Can I do it a bit faster? Can I do it only using 2 steps this time? But I really encourage to keep it very simple and have a starting point. And then you play with it and you improve it and you tune it a little bit. And then the more you do that, the more you'll develop that ability to see things, to see opportunities, to see possibilities, and you develop that vision, what I call the parkour vision. But yeah, you should keep it simple, have a starting point, and listen to yourself. You'll have the answers within. Can I do this? Can I that? What inspires you? And you'll have something if you're just not too ambitious.
Cool. Don't be too ambitious and go and try. So the second part is the assessing the jump. And this is, I think, a really interesting area to dig deeper into, because one of my observations about children and about novices is that they tend, they often don't fail because they overestimate their own abilities. They fail because they underestimate the complexity of the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you put someone in front of a simple jump, right? Everything is as clean as possible. There's very little danger. And you ask them, how far they can jump. Most novices will think that they can jump actually not as far as they can. And it's the same thing with little kids. Like if they think they can jump from one place to another, they definitely can. But where they fail is that they are less able to assess what's potentially dangerous. They don't see the drop behind it. They don't see that it's slippery. They don't see that the branch is rotten. So I was wondering if you have any good kind of basic breakdowns of the things that people should pay attention to when they get into this so that they know how to assess a jump effectively so they can keep themselves safe.
One of the basic principle I have is checking your takeoff and landings. It's very, very basic, but also very efficient. Takeoff and landings. Where do you take off? Where do you land? And check every single part of it. Is it safe? Is it stable? Is it slippery? Is it going to break? Where do I land? How do I land? Where do I position my feet, my arms, my fingers? Is it going to break? So takeoff and landing, very in detail, thorough checkup. And the rest of it is just experience and knowledge. And you get knowledge through experience and, and practice. The more you practice parkour in different terrain, then you gather data, information about mud, for you in your case, mud trees, type of trees. I'm sure you have a lot of knowledge now, and an understanding about different types of tree, the weather, the temperature, how does it affect your environment. And same in the city as well. Your different painting, different coating, different material, different surfaces, different heights, different metals, rubber, and then you gather all of that, and it's just through practice and experience. And then this you can't really buy it to a shop. You just have to do it, and then it comes with time and experience and practice.
Yeah. So stay low until you have a good map of all the different types of terrain that you're trying to move over. That's a good heuristic. Is just don't jump at height until you know pretty well the types of things that you're going to be jumping on.
Exactly. Gather the information, get the experience, and then naturally, you'll be, the call for your jump will be a little bit more challenging, and you progress like that.
Cool. So that brings us to the fear, processing the fear. So unfortunately, we had a really interesting conversation about this that got deleted. So we're going to try to talk about some of those same subjects because I think it's really. I actually think that this may be the most profound aspect of the practice of parkour, that it's a place, it's maybe the most profound laboratory that we have to confront fear, and that fear is actually an incredibly powerful and meaningful thing in our lives, but we have to develop the right relationship with it.
Yes.
So can you take us a little bit through your process right now as far as you're feeling the fear, how do you manage that?
I manage it now compared to before with more calm, and I'm more like serene, with more serenity. That's how I want to handle fear now. Regular exposure, gradual exposure to fear. That's what I always recommend. Obviously, what was scary to you last year is probably not as scary to you right now. Because you practice and then you just improved. I recently decided to go through a 30 days handstand challenge because I wanted to face my fear on a daily basis. And I wanted to put myself in a position every day where I had to find a challenging handstand, most of the time at height, facing a drop. And really engaging with that challenge and facing my fear every day. So I did that. And to grow, to learn, losing my train of thought.
What's your process for dealing with fear?
The process when I deal with the fear?
Yeah. That was the question.
I think my determination to do what I want to do leaves no room for fear anymore. You know, there's an element of fear. First of all, when I say, oh, I want to do a handstand there on the top of that building, scary. But then the process of me connecting with the fact that I want to do it, I know I can do it, and I will do it, is becomes so amplified and so big. There's no more room for fear. This is the bubble, and my desire to do what I want to do takes over everything. There's no more room for fear. I want to do it, I know I can do it, and I will do it. So I focus on that, I'm completely immersed in that. And that's why I say it's a very calm and determined, process, decision. I haven't experienced fear while doing any of those handstands. The fear was just during the call. Oh, that's there. There's a big drop. If you fall, you die. Steph, you're aware? Yes, I'm aware. I know it. I want to do it, and I'm going to do it. Plain and simple. And this was so powerful. There's no room for fear anymore. So it was very, very calm and determined process. And that was really cool. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So if we think about fear on a neurological level, right? There's kind of
here's the analysis.
Yeah. Let's say there's three. The way I've been thinking about it is there's three enemies of fear. There's three things that make it hard for fear to enter, and one of them is calmness. Right? Calmness is sort of you experience when you experience fear. Basically, it increases the arousal level in your sympathetic nervous system. So calming is bringing yourself down in the sympathetic nervous system. And I see this when athletes, if you watch most experienced parkour athletes, when they're preparing for a jump, they will, they'll step back to where they're going to jump from, and they'll breathe out a couple times. They'll exhale. Okay. And that breathe out, that's actually down regulating for your nervous system. We calm down as the breath leaves our body. And so having an extended exhale that calms us down. You also see people shake themselves out. That's another thing. You're shaking tension out of your body.
Yeah. Before every handstand, I would do a bit of meditation. So sit down, just stay in the mind, breathe, and then shake the body. Exactly that. Yeah.
And then most parkour practitioners have a ritual, right? Like for me, and this is pretty common, I spit on my hands, rub my hands together, and then I rub the bottoms of my feet. It's really amusing because I do that when I'm going to do a flip, and my hands aren't going to do anything, but you've done it so many times that it becomes a thing that just helps set your nervous system. It's a routine. So those are kind of some of the things that I do, and I was curious if you recognize that, and if you can if there's any specifics to the way that you go through that process. Calm, more and more, and I say that the young people, to my team actually, the other day we had a discussion about adrenaline and how it was a fuel for me when I was younger, and how it is still a fuel for a lot of the young practitioners, and it's not a healthy source of energy, adrenaline. So I'd rather, try to get rid of that and make a decision that's more stable, more calm, at peace. It's way healthier. So yeah, and again I lost my train of thought. My God, what was the question again? I get lost easily. Yeah. It was specifically about going the little ritual and the down regulation of the nervous system. Is there anything specifically about the way that you go about that?
Breathing. Yeah, breathing is one for me. Breathing helps me. That's my morning practice every day. It just brings me to the here and now. And when you're here now, there's no room for fear. Fear is in the past or is in the future. It's not now. Now is now, and now, and now again. So when you practice that, then it really it's a powerful thing. So I bring myself to here and now through breathing. And that's one of my tricks. Shaking the body as well. But deep breath here and now.
Do you do anything specifically with your breath?
So I learned from Tibetan monks in London many years ago. I practiced this. It's called Shine meditation in Tibet practice. And it's basically focusing on your breathing. So you're breathing from your nose. in and out from your nose. You stick your tongue up and you gaze in front of you. And you just basically focus and bring your awareness onto your breathing. You don't force the breathing, you just let it happen naturally. Any thoughts comes in, you just let them come and go. You don't hang, you don't cling onto your thought, you don't engage with that thought. Just come back gently to your breathing. And you bring the awareness to your breathing over and over again. And be gentle with yourself. If you engage with your thought, it's okay. Or you observe it, come back to your breathing. And then there's this thing that you train and practice, and then you increase the time you can keep the mind still, where you don't engage with the thought. You go from 5 seconds to 10 seconds to a minute, to 20 minutes still, and you stay in the present moment without any distraction. So that's something I practice every day, in the morning.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've picked up a meditation practice over the last few years, and I think a lot of movement practitioners are noticing that it's helpful. And it's interesting because in a lot of ways these things are deeply connected. If you look at traditional martial arts practices, there's always a mind practice that goes along with the physical practice, or there's always a physical practice that goes along with the mind practice. These things kind of need to live together. So it's cool to hear that you're doing that as well. And you've noticed that helps achieve the calm state when you're jumping?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. So, okay, so going back to, well, you talked about adrenaline and the role of adrenaline, and I'm very interested in that because I guess I still feel like there is a role for that at certain times to overcome certain jumps when you need a little extra force. And you've talked about the idea of, training with David was learning like the dark side, and then training with Williams was like the light side, because there was this coming from a place of peace versus coming from a place of anger. Again, going back to the neurology, anger in some sense is an emotion that exists to help us overcome fear. If you see a predator and you have to fight your way out, it's like anger is the thing that kicks on and allows you to get out of that situation without being overcome by your fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been playing with how to find this little edge just for the specific types of jumps, because if I tap into that anger too much, it's very costly. Like it burns you out. You turn into Emperor Palpatine after you too much fear, right? Or too much anger. And I also see this so often in young parkour athletes who haven't quite figured out their mental game yet. They're really relying on, like, they're yelling at each other, they're yelling at themselves, and when they jump with that energy, they may make the jump, but they always land stiff. They have terrible form.
Yeah. And also, how much of it do you remember when I know I've been doing it many times. When you jump with that anger, adrenaline, how much of it do you remember? It's just like a dream. It happened like a flash. You did it, yes. But how much of it did you process and remember and benefit? No, not that much. Not as much as you understand and you're calm and you're,
Yeah. It's interesting. That was a metric that Tyson and I used. Tyson was my co-founder with Parkour Visions, as you know. But we used to like, if we did a jump, then the next question was, did you remember the jump?
Mm-hmm.
And how well did you remember the jump? Could you actually like go through the moments and feel it out? Because when you were operating from too much fear, within too much fear or too much anger, it's like you black out during the jump. It just goes away.
Exactly. Yeah, you just switch it off and you black out. It's exactly that.
And it's a terrible place to operate from as far as having good control. And that's one thing.
Plus, it's dangerous. On top of that, it's dangerous. It can really lead to injury. Most of the time it goes well, but it's you go blindly there, and then it comes with danger.
Mm-hmm. So I told you this the last time, but I was working specifically on one jump this year, which I showed you the last time we were here. But it's about 9 feet long by 4 feet high, from a tree branch to another tree branch, and I kept bouncing off of it, and I had kind of worked myself through most of the fear of it, but I just couldn't quite summon the energy to push as hard as I needed to. And that was when I tapped into that. I think of it like a dragon slayer energy. It's like when you face a problem, there's a a part of you that responds by wanting to kill the problem, to destroy the problem. And there's part of you that like wants to tame the problem. And you want to have the right balance between those. That's what it feels like. And this one, it called for that. But I only was able to tap into that because if I failed, I wasn't going to get badly hurt. Right? I wouldn't ever tap into that energy at a jump where I'm 30 feet off the ground. It wouldn't be safe. But I'm curious if you ever do use that, or if you see that it could be useful to use that energy just in a kind of a very strategic way.
Yes, for sure. Anger is a close relative to determination and will.
Yeah.
So when I get pissed off, and I want to do it, then it helps me to develop my will and my determination to do it. And so I guess there's nothing wrong with an element of I guess frustration. You really want to get there. You have it in you, and it's just a matter of unlocking it. And it's okay. I think it brings it develops your determination to do it. And as you said, if you talk about balance, and it's a balance thing, it's not all about the anger. You have an element of it enough to just build that will, and the rest is calm and based on understanding of what's happening.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
It's like I think of it almost like a knife, right? You want the blade of the knife to be calmness, but maybe the edge is anger, and that's what helps you accomplish what you need. Another way that I think about both fear and anger is those are emotions that you want to be able to ride and not be ridden by. Right? You don't ever want them to be in control. When you get to that point, you're and then again, that's
being aware it's there. There's a bit of anger, but it's not that bad, and it pushed me to be more determined and actually really take the task seriously. If you're aware of that, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the last enemy of fear, which is maybe my favorite. So we'll say we have our dragon slayer energy, our dragon tamer energy, and then we have the trickster energy, right? The trickster energy is play, right? When you're truly engaged in a play state, when you're laughing and having fun, it's hard for fear to enter your heart. So the other way that I broke that jump that I was telling you about was I started dancing and roughhousing with my friends. I put on music that I liked. I started kicking my buddy and punching him, and just gently, and we were going back and forth. And as soon as I felt like really full of that playful energy, I walked over and I was able to do the jump. And so I was curious if you have any thoughts on how we tap into that energy as a power source as well, and how we can balance these kind of three different modes of breaking fear.
Yeah, fun and play is very important in parkour. I think parkour also reconnects you with your inner child and things we do when we're kids, innocence like that. So it's important. I guess also it helps you in that situation to relax and also touch with your calm. And really relax. So that's good. And talking about balancing it out, I don't think it applies to every situation. When there's an element of life or death, involved life or death situation where you actually risk your life. If you miss the jump, you die. I personally can't use that technique to overcome the fear.
Yeah.
The playfulness, the fun, the lightness. I tend to approach it in a more serious way, and that pushes the playfulness a bit on the side. But that said, those situations, they are rare. I don't, and except that challenge that I've been doing every day, I don't risk my life every day on a daily basis usually. So that seriousness that I have, it's pretty rare. Most of the time, I'd rather be light, playful, enjoying dancing, rhythm. I like dancing a lot. I think parkour was a form of dance in many ways as well. Yeah, that's cool.
Cool. So one more question about fear. One thing I've noticed about fear is people often view fear as an enemy, something to be gotten rid of completely. But I actually feel like if I'm too unafraid, then I'm going to die. Like, fear is my friend. It tells me that a situation is serious, and that if I actually get to the point where I don't feel afraid of something that I know is dangerous, I view that as a sign that there's something wrong with me, and then I need to walk away from that situation right away. So I'm wondering if you've noticed that as well, that there's a potential as you practice these things to become apathetic to your own fear in a way that's actually dangerous to you.
Yeah, fear to me is an opportunity. It's an indicator that there's something to understand, and I have to get close, and I have to face that, and I have to understand and deal with that fear. It's really an opportunity for me to grow, like obstacles. Any challenging situation, any discomfort, any that comes with this kind of uncomfortable feeling and fear. I think it's a great opportunity for us to grow, and we shouldn't shy away from that. We should actually go for it. Fear, okay, cool, let's go. What is it? What is it about? Fear, scared of what exactly? And engage, get familiar. I think it's a very healthy thing to do. And now it's almost like a reflex. Fear, all right, cool, where? Let's go. Let's go now. And I'm hungry. It's embracing the pain somehow. It's bizarre, but I believe I learned that it's an opportunity for me to learn and grow. So it's cool. It's exciting. Let's go.
Excellent. Okay, so we're almost an hour into this now, and that makes an hour and 40 minutes of an interview. So there's probably getting close to a good wrap-up time. But I really wanted to talk about task-based training before we finish, because this was a thing that I really liked about your seminar. When you came here, you said to us, "I'm not going to teach you any techniques this weekend," which is maybe surprising for most people, right? They think they're going to go to a seminar and they're going to learn techniques. But one of the ideas that you were presenting, it seemed like, was that that the named techniques and the idea of really focusing on techniques was really secondary to the development of parkour. And I think that's something that really got lost as parkour spread from across the internet. Like I remember about 6 to 8 months into my training, I could do a Kong vault, I could do a dash vault, I could do a speed vault, I could do all the named vaults, I could do a cat leap, I could do whatever. And I was kind of like, I looked to my friend Dana, I was like, are we good at parkour now? Like, what's the next step beyond accomplishing this? So I sometimes think of the way that parkour was spread as it was like, we popularized a bunch of tools, but nobody knew what we were building with them. So I want you to talk about, I'd love to hear you kind of break down why task-based training was important to you as something to remind the parkour community about.
Yeah, well, you said it all. It was really about presenting parkour origins. It was really about coming back to the origins and the original concepts that helped creating parkour. And task-oriented problem solving was one of them. All the techniques that are already here, they are contributing to parkour being an established discipline. It's established now. Before it get to that stage where we are today, and we all know, it was a creation process. It was a magical thing where the unknown, completely unknown experience. Can we do this? Let's try this. Let's try and find out. So it was such a great learning situation. And this is parkour. This is parkour. And that's why I said the parkour spirit is when you are in that zone. As soon as you move to practicing techniques, you are in a sport context. You practice an established, existing sport, and then you remove very important aspects of parkour that happen in the beginning. So it was parkour origins was about concept based, and so the guys before, and then I was lucky enough to start parkour at the time where it was still the end of that. I tasted a bit of that creation process. And I've seen David and the guys doing things that they didn't know. And it was really about, it was a quest, it was a research, it was exploring possibilities, exploring the human possibilities, the physical level. And it was real research. Can we do this? And it was a lot of the call for the jump, it was really happening in the connection with you, your potential. Can I do this? And try and find out and matching your vision, your thoughts with reality. And this is, again, a very, very important and valuable aspect of parkour. This is, for me, the worth of parkour. Outside that, you're just practicing sport. And you should try to replicate that in different areas of your life. Because after 20 years of parkour, for me now, I'm practicing the sport of parkour a lot now. I'm not practicing the magic of, connecting with the creation of something that you don't know, because I know parkour. I know parkour for 20 years now. I know it so well. I find myself in that situation when I write, because that's new to me. And I write now. And how do I write? No clue. I've never learned how to write. So it brings me back to that things where I don't know. I have an idea. Let's try and find out, and let's match my vision with the reality. And when I write now, I'm experiencing some of that, what I call the magic of when you create something. The first one who created piano, for example, started to play piano. I had something different than someone who's now going to piano lessons and start piano straight away, because he's going to practice an established discipline that we already know. This is step 1, step 2, step 3. This is the process. This is the practical way to practice piano. And then you go there. But the first one who started to type and connect with that, that sound, that's another sound. Let's put those sounds together and connect with yourself, your soul, and how you express yourself with that instrument. Same with parkour, we have a body as an instrument. We have our space and environment. We have ideas and thoughts. And how do we create our own music with the environment? And that was what was happening before. And task training and problem solving was a big part of that. Connecting with your thought and ideas, creativity. Can I do this? Can I do that? Create scenarios. Try and find out. I just see it's very, very essential to parkour. Yes.
It's really interesting for me because I kind of think I experienced a little bit of that process when I took my training from primarily urban to primarily natural. When I started moving in the trees, it's like the techniques that were popular, they didn't quite fit, right? Like I'll give you an example. The parkour climb up, really vital skill in urban parkour. But in nature, you almost never find a wall that's 90 degrees and 90 degrees on top. Mm-hmm. So you're rarely in a situation where you're going to use that exact skill. So either you're going to have the thing slanted and then it's a totally different skill, or it's slanted the other way and you have to use a totally different technique. Or a lot of times, like if you're grabbing onto a branch, it's not going to be square, it's going to be twisted. And so you're going to have to spiral your body up. And so I had to go through this process of sort of learning to recognize opportunities in the environment that didn't look like the skills that I already had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I was lucky because there's, Volunteer Park kind of has a lot of places where you can do vaults. It has a lot of places where you can do tic-tacs. There's a lot of things that look like urban parkour to essential. But as I trained there, I started being able to start seeing things in other environments and more stuff. And what happened was when I started trying to teach people in nature, what I noticed was that they seem to learn things by being asked to do a task faster and in a more robust way than when I ask them to do a skill first. So I actually teach myself, I teach a task first. So I give people like, go over this, and this. And then I try to teach people the principles. And then I try to teach people, okay, here are the individual skills and how you exercise them. So I think it's a really profound thing that's really missing in the way that kind of we think about these skills now. So I'd love to hear you talk just a little bit more about what that looked like and how you would apply that. How do you train in a more task-oriented way rather than a skill-oriented way?
Yeah, I think I pretty much haven't taught a technique in many years now. I like the idea of creating a learning environment for someone. And I know what's happening there. I know what I want to get out of the situation. the student doesn't know. I wanted to create a learning situation, and then I want to let the student find out. So I stay very general with the task, and I want them to engage with the task and then try to, switch on their brain, switch on their body, and try and make them find out what kind of tools they have in hand for them to unlock the problem. And it's a personal journey, it's a personal answer. You have many different solutions to unlock a problem. What is yours? And how do you, find out what's working for you? What do you have what are your abilities, and how do you use them to unlock? And it's a very personal thing, and I think there's a way more reward and benefits for someone to find out by himself rather than me. It's like I set a problem and you find the answer. If I come with the answer straight away, you know how to get there? This is a step board. You gave away the answer. Yeah, and you're removing a very important part of the process. And I think it's really sad when coaches give all those answers. And I know we have a lot of knowledge as coaches, and we want to share, we want to give, but you're not helping them at the end of the day. So same as you, I just keep it simple. This is the task. How do you do? Oh, and then they start to think. If they really, really don't get it, I'll give another element. And then once they perform, they gave me their solution, then I will look, okay, how can we make your solution better? Or is there another solution? And then I'll go with another element. And maybe if you really get completely wrong, maybe I'll step in and, you know what, if you put your hand there, it's going to make your life easier. But that comes at the very, very end, if the person really, really doesn't get it.
So that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting that we're all kind of evolving in this way. I don't know if you're familiar with the group Fighting Monkey. They teach kind of dance, martial arts mixed, the Fighting Monkey practice, whatever it is. Yeah. They had a video called Teaching Without a Teacher. And in the video they say basically when you teach a student, you steal everything from them. You take everything from them because you're taking away their own engagement with the process. And I remember thinking about this a lot when we first started parkour. It was like when we first started teaching, it was because, my generation, we didn't have anybody to learn from here in the States. So we taught ourselves. And it was like, well, how do we give our students the best that we have to offer, but not lose whatever it was that we gained by having to go through the process ourselves? And that's
very, very important, because again, it's easy to get lost with your ego and take coverage for the task. And then at the end, it's not about the student, it's about you. It's about you showing your knowledge, you shining as a coach. Oh, he knows so much, he's so good. I don't care. It's about the student. You're here to help and to serve. Do it. And yeah, very important.
That was definitely, I would say, the hardest lesson for me to learn as a teacher is, I have too much pride in my big analytical brain. And I have so many brilliant things to say to the students.
Yeah.
And so often it's really actually just getting in their way. And to make the process about them is something that for all the young teachers who are here, like, you recognize you're not this font of knowledge pouring itself out to people. You're just facilitating their journey.
Mm-hmm. So, yes,
beautiful.
I agree with that very much so.
Well, I think that's probably a good place for us to stop. Actually, it was great having you on. You were my first Skype interview, so we had some hiccups, but I think it worked out all overall. Hopefully we can do it again. And hopefully we'll see each other again soon. Maybe we can end up in Europe around the same time one of these days.
Yeah, I like the idea.
Yeah.
I haven't been traveling much lately. I'm just very, very focused on Dubai now, but I think everything has a time and a place. So I'm focused now, but I feel like I'm going to be traveling again soon.
Excellent. Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience? Any parting words before we end the podcast?
I might say again what I've said in the Monkeys back many years ago is really about making sure you're happy when you practice parkour. And if you're not, find something that will make you happy. Another practice, whatever that is. I really wish people, we're all here to live and be happy. We all have our struggles, our sufferings. And I find parkour very, very useful tool for me to help me grow, in many ways and make me a better person, better version of myself. So I can have a more significant, meaningful impact on the world and other people around me. And that works for me. If it's not working for you, then really ask yourself, why am I practicing parkour? And should I practice something else on top of parkour if parkour is not bringing me what I'm looking for? And being very blunt, honest in that sense. Because I wish people not to jump more. I want people to live better lives, really. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Very good advice. Excellent. For those who don't know, The Monkey's Back, or Le Songes de Retour, if I pronounced that anywhere near correctly,
Yes.
is a documentary produced by Julie Angel back in, 2007?
2006, I believe.
2006.
Yeah, 2006.
It was a huge influence on my training. It's a really wonderful documentary, and I heard through the grapevine that there's going to be a follow-up.
Yeah, exactly. On that note, I just talked to Julia recently, and then we're both really keen to work on a part 2 and complete the message that's been shared in the first time. My English is better, hopefully. So, and plus, I think my conclusion and the maturity, the experience I have, led to having a clearer message that I want to share with the community. Hopefully, it will help people with their practice and their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to know more about Stephane, definitely go watch the original Le Songes de Retour or The Monkey is Back documentary. Where else can people find you? Where should they be learning more about you?
My Facebook page, Stephane Vigroux. I started to rewrite articles again. I'm going to try to put regular content out there about parkour and its key messages and life lessons. So Facebook personal page, Stephane Vigroux, or my Instagram. I'm going to release 3 videos this week. After you, I'm just going to release one quick video about the handstand challenge I've been doing for months. So on Instagram, Stephane_Vigroux. You'll find me there. And yeah.
Cool. We'll put all that in the show notes.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
All the best with your journey, your practice, your teaching adventures, and you're doing a good job. I just can see by the smiles on your students' face, they look like happy people, and you're doing a good job. So well done, and all the best.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stephane, and likewise to you.
Thanks a lot.